Welcome back, students. We are going to start Unit C in Science 24, and this is probably the most relevant, timely unit I have ever taught. This unit is called Disease Defense, and the first lesson is pandemic diseases. Now, how crazy is that? Look at this objective we have. So here's what the curriculum says for me to teach. List the social and economic impact of pandemic diseases on past and present societies. Okay, does it get any more timely than that? No, it doesn't. So I'm going to talk today about the Black Death. Anything that's in italics here, in this whole part here, I don't have to talk about it. It's all optional. But I'm going to talk about the Black Death. And of course, in this unit, I am going to focus on COVID-19 because we're all living it right now. How relevant is this lesson and unit? It's so cool. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so some terminology. First of all, an epidemic is a disease that affects a large number of people within a community or a population or a region. So a disease hits a small area. Okay, well, it could be a large area, but it's just contained within that area. Okay, a pandemic, on the other hand, is an epidemic that spread over multiple countries or continents. So yes, COVID-19 is what we would call a pandemic. I want to talk about the Black Death. So the Black Death was the most fatal pandemic in history. It killed between 75 and 200 million people. The peak came in Europe in a long, long time ago. Now, our situation, COVID-19, isn't anywhere close to that. This was very, very deadly, whereas the numbers for the deaths for COVID-19 are very small compared to the Black Death. Okay, moving on. Okay, and finally, we should know what a pathogen is. A pathogen is a microscopic organism, such as bacterium or a virus, that can cause disease. So think of these as germs. Pathogen is a fancy word for germ. Okay, next. Now, let's talk about the difference between a bacteria and a virus. Bacteria, they're microscopic. They're very small. But you should know that bacterial cells are much larger than viruses, but they're still microscopic. They cause illness in plants, animals. Here's an interesting thing. Many bacteria are actually good for you. Okay, there's good bacteria. We have good bacteria on our skin, inside our body, such as in our intestines that help with digestion. Bacteria are cells. Like we studied cells back in Science 14. Cells have a cell membrane, they have a nucleus, cytoplasm, mitochondria, all of the things inside of a cell. Bacteria are single cells. Okay, and they can reproduce on their own. Okay, now that's a lot different than a virus. Like we've already mentioned, are smaller than bacteria, but they're not considered living. They're not alive because they can't survive without a living host, and they can't reproduce on their own. They can't reproduce. Okay? A virus attaches itself to cells and usually reprograms them to reproduce itself. Because they can't reproduce on their own, they need to invade a living cell and then convince that cell to reproduce the virus. So the cell that's been invaded becomes a little virus factory. Okay. Also, unlike bacteria, most viruses do cause disease. Some bacteria cause disease, but many are very good. But most viruses, disease. Okay? So some of the diseases that are caused by viruses are some of the things that you've probably had. You've probably had a cold. Flu is just, it feels like a cold, but way worse than the cold. More chills, more shakes. I think I actually had the flu a couple years ago, and it just felt different than the cold. It like put me down. And they say that COVID-19 has a lot of the same kind of conditions as the flu, but it could be much worse as well. AIDS, herpes, chickenpox. Okay, so those are caused by viruses. Okay, moving on. So this part here is an animal cell. Could be a dog cell or a human cell. Here is the bacteria. So this is singular. One bacterium or many bacteria is plural. Here's a virus. Okay, so viruses are a lot smaller, and they're not cells. They're this other category. They're viruses. That's their category. Okay, moving on. All right, let's talk about the Black Death, which is actually named the plague. Okay, I'll put all these up. So mostly originated in East or Central Asia and was spread through trade routes. Okay, so here's Asia. There was all these trade routes throughout, and that's how it ended up getting into Europe. Okay? It was most likely carried by fleas, these bad boys right here, living on black rats. Okay? And then rats were inside of ships. And so the fleas would bite you and leave these marks, and that's how it spread the disease. Okay? It got to Europe, the plague or the Black Death got to Europe when in 1347, so again a long time ago, when 12 ships came to this port. So the people gathered on the docks were met with a horrifying surprise. Most of the sailors were dead, and the rest were covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. They say that these boils were like the size of an egg. And city authorities ordered the death ships out of the harbor, but it was too late. Somebody on the dock got it, and then it started to spread. Over the next 5 years, the Black Death would kill more than 20 million people in Europe, almost 1/3 of the continent's population. That is an insane number. So what causes the plague? Well, the plague is not a virus. The plague was a bacterium named Yersinia pestis. You might think of pestis as like pests, carried on pests, fleas, rats. It was spread through flea or lice bites. Fleas lived on rats, and rats were everywhere. I went to Europe. I actually saw a rat. And I don't think I'd ever seen a rat. Living here in Alberta, I've never seen a rat. Other than like lab rats and that kind of thing on TV and at university. There was increasing international trade. So I showed you all those trade routes on the map. And ships were infested with rats. And so that's how this thing is spread. Plus, there was a rising urban population, crowded areas. Human waste would build up and animal waste would build up. So the place was dirty and unsanitary. Now think of what's happening today. Today, we're social distancing. Well, back here, if this place is crowded, they're not social distancing, disease will spread. They also lacked medical knowledge. And did you know that the plague actually still exists today? But we have modern medicine and we can treat the disease. So what were the symptoms? Well, they had swelling basically, armpits, groin, other body parts, and then these blackened boils. So here's a picture from back in the day, and you can see these egg-sized lumps all over these people's bodies. Okay, scary stuff. Okay, moving on. This is a picture of what a physician would wear, what a doctor would wear as he would go and visit people with the plague. I have not researched why there's a beak, and so I'm curious about this, but I didn't have time to look further into it. The plague was so deadly, like I said, 1/3 of the population died. It almost always resulted in death. If you got it, you were going to die. As compared to the flu, where most people don't die, although the flu does kill people. Coronavirus, most people don't die when they get it. Okay, it killed 1/3 of Europe's population, and then this is a staggering number. It killed 90% of the city of Florence. 99 out of 10 people, or 90 out of 100 people, died. That is insane. I've been to Florence. Florence is a beautiful city. It has this famous cathedral, and it's just incredible. It's an incredible view. I was actually there on Easter Sunday when the church bells were ringing, and it was so awesome. And there's a lot of famous structures there too. In fact, in this there's a square right around that building, and here's that famous cathedral, the Duomo. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of statues in the square. There's a whole bunch of statues, and one of them is a replica of the statue of David, and the real one is there as well, but it's not in that part of the city. It's somewhere else. This is a famous bridge you learn about in social studies. I believe it was called the Bridge of Sighs. Something about World War I or World War II. I can't remember the details. I should look that up. Anyway, moving on. Okay, now here's the whole point of this lesson. Back on the objectives, it said list the social and economic effects of a pandemic disease. Well, I'm just going to mention this one little thing, and then you'll have an assignment. Here is one economic effect of the plague. Animals got the plague as well, and that led to a shortage of wool. So now there was less wool available for clothing and blankets, and people that had animals, the animals were dying, and they lost money because they couldn't sell the animals. They couldn't sell the wool. So, economic effects. Okay, here's your assignment. I want you to list the social and economic impact of COVID-19 on your life. So let's talk about your social life. How has COVID-19 affected your social life? I want you to write me a little list of the things that have changed in the last few months for you. Then I want you to list how has COVID-19 affected the economy of Alberta. Economy means money. Okay, economics. Okay, so I would like you, if you go on to the Google Classroom, that assignment is on there. I want you to talk with your parents about this as well, or your guardians, and have them help you list the social and economic effects of COVID-19. Okay, the next lesson we'll move on and talk more about disease defense. And thanks for listening. Okay, bye.